Introduction to Minoan and Mycenaean Civilizations, Myth and Legend. In this module, you will explore and study the civilizations of ancient Crete, that is the Minoan, and archaic Greece, the Mycenaean, and gain a deeper understanding of these civilizations and cultures through an examination of their myths, legends, architecture, and art. Many a psychologist has noted that the stories we share about ourselves, the ones that we most often tell and retell over and over again, reveals something deeper about ourselves beyond the mere narrative events we relate. Why do we continually tell this particular story about an event or experience in our lives? What was the significance of the event or experience? Did it define us in some way? Does sharing the story with another and discovering that they too have felt or experienced something similar bind us to each other, forming a common bond, a mutual heritage, a close relationship? Imagine these shared stories within larger groups, a family, a clan, a tribe, a nation, the Western Hemisphere or the Eastern Hemisphere. They too would form a kind of kinship of common myth and folklore regarding events, customs, or practices, rituals, etc. And just as the stories we tell about ourselves may reveal our desires, our traumas, our aspirations or setbacks, our achievements, so too do the larger cultural and national stories that form our cultural mythos. Let's first make a distinction between a fairy tale, a fable, a legend, and a myth. A fairy tale usually incorporates supernatural or magical events and includes characters like a fairy godmother, pixies, or elves, and is often cautionary in nature. Animals can also be characters in a fairy tale. Fairy tales most often delineate clearly between good characters and evil characters. Examples might be Cinderella, Little Red Riding Hood, Hansel and Gretel. A fable is often about animals, plants, or forces of nature that are human-like and with a specific moral or ethical point. Examples of these might be Aesop's fables, as in The Crow and the Fox and the Grapes, or The Tortoise and the Hare. A legend is based on real or composite characters, situations, places from history, often exaggerated. Examples might be the legend of Romulus and Remus, of King Arthur, Paul Bunyan, Lady Godiva, Robin Hood, the Trojan War, Atlantis, the Fountain of Youth, etc. Myths, however, attempt to explain existence and perhaps direct moral conduct, sometimes revealing the best and worst of our natures and explaining aspects of our natural world or delineating the psychology, customs, mores, values, and ideals of a society or a culture. A close study often reveals an underlying meaning of a historical, social, political, religious, or cultural shift or advent, some cataclysm or upheaval, or some dramatic change. And they reveal as much about a culture or a civilization or a nation as do our personal stories. Myths are stories that create and reveal a cultural history and will include original creation stories, end of the world stories, afterlife stories, natural world stories, death and rebirth or resurrection stories, etc. As for example, stories in the Judeo-Christian, Islamic, Hindu, and other religious texts. In discussing religious stories as myths, I do not mean to suggest there are no truths in them depending on individual views or matters of faith. In whatever case, a close study of the specific features of the myth often reveals an underlying meaning or insight into that culture. Consider, for example, the biblical story of Abraham and Isaac, where God asks Abraham to sacrifice his son, Isaac, as an act of devotion, as a means to demonstrate that Abraham is willing to give up his most valued possession to a higher value, his obedience to God. Abraham, at that moment, before he is about to slay his son, is told by an angel not to perform the sacrifice and to substitute a ram or animal for the child instead. This myth, beneath the lesson about testing devotion, can also reveal a shift from earlier practices of human sacrifice to animal sacrifice in early ritual. Today, descendants of Abraham symbolically heap their sins upon grain products, as in cast your bread upon the waters, during the period of atonement, and thus rid themselves of the sin or manifest other forms of sacrifice, such as fasting, abstinence, etc. This shift in the idea of sacrifice, symbolic placement of sins on an object, human, animal, grain, that is then burnt or cast out in one form or another, is seen in various religions and religious practices as they have evolved over time. And in a symbolic and faith-based sense, Jesus was sacrificed for the sins of humankind, the last human sacrifice. Consider other cultural myths, such as the many stories from Greek mythology wherein Zeus comes down in various forms to ravish a mortal woman, impregnating her with a future demigod, as in Leda and the Swan and others. The god-mortal union is likewise a common theme of many religious or cultural stories, including the Christian story of the Immaculate Conception, and these often serve to signal a cultural, spiritual, or other form of revolution or new age to come, a prophecy or messianic promise. These are just a few of the myths that have been passed down to us, solidified, codified, ritualized, whose deeper meanings and particular features reveals a spirit of the times, and are those from which many of our contemporary values, ethics, morals, customs, judgments, and views take their form and tenor. Again, consider a story about any nation, say the United States, and how that story may take on mythic proportions. George Washington's apple tree, I cannot tell a lie story, for example, or the Boston Tea Party served to bind a people under an ethic, honesty in this case, or an event that may be exaggerated, propagandized, or to which is lent a divine justification for the events and purpose, such as manifest destiny, or the settling of the West mythology, that served to unify and justify white settler Western expansion at the cost of Native American life and livelihood. Or consider the mythology of the Civil War in regard to the Southern cause and a continuation of slavery, what was known as the peculiar institution, and how it has created a mythology that belies the actuality of that evil institution. Southern generals and the Confederacy's president, Lee, Jackson, Davis, are all still viewed and represented in much art and sculpture, let alone literature, as almost having a divine status. In these specific examples, one can see how the mythology can bind a particular group and entrench them in a belief system that has a common heritage and a justified cause, and that at times can be a mythology used to denigrate, subjugate, or worse, annihilate another people or culture. Today, many of these long-held national myths are being reimagined. Consider such American mythic themes as rags to riches, self-reliance, and rugged individualism, or new mythic heroes based on classical and medieval archetypes as reimagined in Star Wars, Marvel Comics, or a combination of these categories in the Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings series, and what these re-emerging myths tales say about our contemporary culture. Other myths that present negative ethnic, racial, and other cultural stereotypes and mythologies are being reassessed and debunked. Consider name changes such as Redskins or the renaming of military forts. But many more continue to imbue almost every aspect of our views, customs, outlooks, in short, of our daily lives. In this unit, you'll explore those myths, legends, art, and architecture of the Minoan and the Mycenaean periods to see the seeds of what has taken root and flowered in our contemporary